Hey there, and thank you for clicking on the thumbnail. So, this video is going to give you all an insight into the inner workings of the mind of the INFJ and the INFP. For this video, I'm teaming up with my friend here on YouTube, Sean, who runs the INFP HD channel, to give you all a more personal touch, to give you all a more kind of emotional sense of what it's like to be an INFJ in my case and an INFP in Sean's case. So first and foremost, we're going to be touching upon our respective childhoods. For myself, growing up, I was a bit of a lone wolf. I spent, even from the age of 3, maybe even 2, most of my time just in my own internal world, playing inside my own head, inside my own imagination. My imagination was definitely my strongest factor, and this very much was the case throughout most of my school years. It is something of a running joke amongst my family that I didn't actually start speaking until I could form fully coherent sentences. And that was very much owing to the fact that I internalized things first and foremost. I would generally not externalize until I could coherently internalize. But even then, even with the ability to form sentences, I was very much averse to interaction. I had pretty much one friend for the first 2 years of school, ages 4 to 5, and even with him I only spent a small portion of my school day. Most of my time was just wandering around on my own, observing, and most of the time just imagining things. But as you might imagine, being such a loner and being so averse to social interaction, I got into some trouble with kids my age. I wasn't always the most popular kid, for example. Oftentimes I was the least popular kid. Kids didn't like to see someone who was just comfortable in their own space, but perhaps even more notable was when I wanted to interact with kids, I didn't really had the experience to call upon. I hadn't really developed the social skill sets to the same extent as they had, because all of the time that they had spent practicing these social skill sets, I had just spent in my own la-la land inside my head. And so as I grew older, from the ages, say 7, 8 onwards, this lack of social expenditure really started to catch up with me. I just wasn't good at interacting. I didn't fully understand the social norms. I didn't fully understand the hierarchy of the school. In many ways, I rejected it because I just wanted to be myself. I wasn't really playing the game in the same way other kids were. And this became much more of a problem in secondary school, which here in England is from the ages of 11 onwards. In school years, that would be years 7 to 11. So when it came to secondary school, I still wanted a lot of alone time, but I was also in an environment whereby I didn't know a lot of people. And only 2 of my school buddies came with me to the secondary school. So I was suddenly in this environment whereby not only did I not know a lot of people, but I hadn't really developed my social skill set and confidence employing that skill set to the same extent as other kids, to the extent that was necessary in order to be accepted by people. So yeah, I got plenty of alone time, but that wasn't always by choice. And much of my school life, especially the first 3 years, was spent just by myself. And yeah, maybe a third of that time I wanted to be alone anyway. But then the remainder, it was mainly just because I wasn't accepted. I wasn't playing the game. I wasn't conforming to a masculine archetype, per se. I hated aggression, full stop. So if there was any kind of conflict, I'd generally be averse to it. But perhaps more than anything else, I was just a bit weird. I had different ideas to other people. I enjoyed different kinds of activities to other people. I was no good at sports. I much preferred to be in my own world. I preferred activities that enjoyed the use of imagination. And it was only upon hitting the age of 14, from years 10 onwards in school, that I began to take responsibility for that side of myself I had not previously cultivated. I began to play the game. I began to accept it was necessary to embody a sense of masculinity, and I saw the value in doing so. I began to see the necessity of adversarial situations and even the potential to enjoy situations like that. Even more than that, the potential these situations have for strengthening a relationship. Conflict is healthy. Conflict is not something to run away from, it's something to embrace and to approach with a positive attitude. So many things that I rejected previously, I suddenly embraced, and I became able to stand up for myself. I became able to befriend other people. Heck, I became able to act in a fairly outgoing manner, speaking without thinking, improvising in a social atmosphere. And again, this strengthened my connections, it solidified my relationships, and more than that, it gave me a sense of self-worth. It restored my confidence and it enabled me to do the things I wanted to do. And that is my story growing up as an INFJ. So now I'm going to pass you over to Sean and you'll get direct insight into his own childhood.
Hey Harry, thanks for having me on the channel. I always vibe with INFJs. I don't know, it's just, you guys intrigue me big time. So for me, I think it's similar how I grew up. There's a lot of things in my past that I don't recall. I'm spotty with how, I have moments in my past that really stick with me, whether it was some kind of traumatizing experience, very high or low point. Those remain vividly in my head, but early on in my childhood, one thing that stuck with me was from my mom, and she always used to say that I was just one of those kids that just stayed off to the side and just watched everything, everybody. I was just always trying to just, I guess, collect data, which is still how I, kind of proceed life to this day, is just always observant in nature. But yeah, I was always trying to just figure out how I fit in. And it's through watching people that I kind of take little pieces of them here and there. In my elementary school days, there was a lot of, first through sixth grade or whatever in the States. I had a family that had two boys that I hung out with. They lived like 2 houses down from me, but I spent most of my time there in Southern California. And I always just vibed with them. I hung out with them. I have a younger brother and sister that I grew up with. But those younger boys were more of my age, and they were just doing things that I like to do, playing football in the street, dressing up as ninjas and jumping through bushes at nighttime. But it was just, I don't know, boys being boys, but it was a small group. It's not like I went to their house and also went to like 15 other people's houses. I just spent the majority of all my time there, and that's where I wanted to go. I wanted to go over there and just hang out with those guys. I think it's just always wanting to go over to that house was a sense of belonging to where it felt comfortable to me, because again, I'm just constantly trying to figure out where I fit in, and that was a belonging sense to me. It's like, yes, I have my family belonging to where we all know each other, but as humans, we typically got to get out of the house and go, bond with the rest of society. And that avenue of using them as a vehicle for me to feel belong to was, I think, why I craved to go over there so much and just have that sense outside of my own family. But again, not to deflate myself with too much interaction with spreading that across multiple houses and, friend circuits and things like that. And one of the things with my sister was when we were growing up in, the elementary school days, like she was more of a person who liked to highlight and introduce that I was her brother. And that was not okay with me because, you have all these friends like, oh, that's your brother, and they want to come talk to you and things like that. But that totally just was not my scene. I did not enjoy when she introduced me as such to draw attention to my, me. So me and her had a little riffing going on when she was in the same school as me, a couple years under me, but she was more of one to go gain friends at the park. We'd be at the park, I would kick and scream and just generally want to stay in the car or go sit on the bench. Wherever the kids were at, I wouldn't always go participate. And it's somewhat of a, missing out on childhood to points of a big social gathering. But I just prefer smaller groups. My friend circle, when I was, going over to their house, that was my comfort zone. I'd go into their house, I felt comfortable. And it wasn't all these random people that I did not know and didn't know who they were. And it's about really finding my place where I kind of enjoyed. So, and then moving on to the junior high school days, it was getting a little bit, obviously more difficult, just so much information swirling around of what we should do and what we shouldn't be doing and things like that. So it was all just coming into my own, where again, it was just, the teenage years for me was just, and the 20s for that matter, but it was just really trying to find my place. Just watching how, the boys would act or the girls or whatever. And it's just like how I kind of fit in the middle of that. And I just like, I vibe with both sides. Just, the emotional sense of being in touch with my feelings and all that stuff. It's not a preferable male type role kind of thing. But that's just where my confusion set in mostly, is just trying to figure out, what's going on, why am I in the middle here? It's just weird. And the high school years was even more. For us, high school 9th through 12th grade. For that, I moved from California to Ohio. Those years for me was just super isolation. I got heavily bullied throughout high school. And it was a rough time. It was a very traumatic time. I remember a lot of those points of, specific moments, and I could just revert back to that time and just recall of how it made me feel and things like that. I didn't have a big friend base. I hung out with one guy mainly, and he was also heavily introverted. I don't know what his type was. But no, we were kind of the lone wolves. We always sat off to the side in the lunchroom. We would find the corner far away from the preppy kids or the jocks and things like that, In those groups are going to be the ones that are going to crave more of that attention, whereas we were kind of polar opposite, to where we were just in our little riffraff crew, just hanging out with the misfits or whatever. But I wasn't a troublemaker. I was absent a lot. I maxed out the school attendance policy because I just it was hard to sustain just all the daily struggles of being a high schooler. And what came in, especially for me, yeah, it was just like me and that other guy. We were just kind of inseparable. We just kind of held on to each other, and just that was our safe place, him and I. And it's just like it was hard to ever see him or I not together. It's like you get those criticisms of these guys are some gay couple or whatever, and it's just like it's not the case. It's just we felt comfortable together, and it's just instead of just being this huge group of people where you just are in this group of all these guys and girls where you just kind of. It's more of a society-based preference to where it's like, oh yeah, he's part of a huge group. That's just not my comfort spot. And for me, even to this day, I don't have a big friend circle. I have a very high standards of who fits into my value department, of who I categorize as a genuine in my circle type person. So yeah, it's hard because again, you get that criticism of why are those two guys over there? Why are they standing against the wall? Why are they not coming to the prom and dressing up in a suit with a little tie, a little bow tie? Because the social world of how it all played out for me just didn't vibe. So I missed out a lot of things. I wasn't like you, Harry. I wasn't a guy who was into sport. I'm very athletic, but I never was part of a sport until I got in the military, where I did some intramural sports, softball and things like that. Part of the military culture or whatever. But going through high school, I was never a sports guy, and it's one of those things where I would watch it, and I kind of always wanted to be a part of that. Like I look back and somewhat of a regret to where I wish I was part of more sports and just had that kind of bonding or team, development early on, because I think that kind of grouping kind of would have helped me more quicker in life, I guess. But no, I wasn't part of groups. I wasn't in after school projects. When I was done with school, my goal was to get home, and it wasn't to be a part of things. And so growing up, it was really that. It's just me spending 20, 30 years of just, I guess, being very observant and really just trying to find out, again, like I said, where I place in this world. And that's what's cool about hearing your perspective, because a lot of it just sounds similar. And INFJs and INFPs, we don't share any of the same primary cognitive functions, but it's interesting to me how similar we are, because again, hearing you speak, it's just like a lot of that resonated with me, and that's how I feel as well. So maybe the perspectives from your side and my side are not super polar opposite, but again, that's how I went through life. And so yeah, Harry, love the content. Super excited I found you, and again, appreciate you for having me on the channel, and it's an honor, sir.
Thank you so much, Sean. Man, it is so interesting, isn't it, that two people of completely different cognitions in many ways can exhibit such similar behaviour and have such a similar childhood experience to each other. And as you know, I'm not a big fan of the dichotomies. I do not believe the INFP and the INFJ are sufficiently similar on a cognitive level to justify having such a similar acronym. But despite the fact that we are clearly quite cognitively different people, at the very least the childhood versions of ourselves had a similar kind of sensitivity, had a similar hyper-individuality, and perhaps also this inner perfectionistic streak whereby we need people to accept us either in our entirety or not at all. And again, while in cognitive function terms, the INFP and the INFJ are indeed very different to each other, it is very interesting that we seem to place a similar value on authenticity. So this video is a bit different to what I usually put up on this channel, but I hope it was a refreshing change. Thank you so much for watching the video, especially if you made it this far, you were awesome. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like, it really does help the channel grow, develop and reach new audiences, and if you have not already done so, make sure to click that subscribe button down below with the bell icon next to it to stay notified of future content. And just a reminder to everyone, there is a dedicated CPT ebook and a CPT tax service, and you can also support this channel on Patreon as well. So I really hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll be seeing you all in a few days' time. Take care.